Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tearing into a truly chilling piece of regional folklore. Now, on the surface, this sounds like your classic run-of-the-mill ghost story. The kind meant to keep people away from the water at night. But as we're going to see, when you look a little closer, this terrifying tale is actually a really profound story of injustice, survival, and ultimate karma.
So who exactly is this veiled boatwoman? Well, let's dive right into this by starting with a terrifying encounter that sets the entire stage. Picture this. A young boy named Deepu and his father are walking along the riverbank in the dead of night. It's pitch black. Suddenly, they hear the distinct rhythmic sound of a boat rowing through the water. Out of the darkness emerges this mysterious woman. Half of her face is obscured by a veil, and she's just standing there, silently on her boat, raising her hand to gesture for them to come aboard.
The dad's reaction? Absolute immediate panic. He issues this desperate warning to his son, telling him, "Don't look at the river at all, and whatever you hear, don't pay attention." This reaction right here perfectly sets the immediate stakes for us. We instantly know this isn't just some spooky, harmless sight. This is a known, lethal threat that actively haunts the village of Madupur. The father grabs his son and they literally run for their lives, leaving the mysterious woman behind in the dark. Like any good urban legend, this entity operates on a strict, terrifying set of supernatural rules. She's a creature of the night, always partially hidden by her veil, and always completely silent at first. But the absolutely crucial rule is the fatal one. Anyone who steps foot onto her boat either vanishes without a trace or is found dead a few days later. These are the strict rules of the haunting. And, as you'll see, they're rules that our next victims tragically decide to ignore. All right, bringing us to section 1, the missing link, which we'll call Mohini's tragedy. Let's see what actually happens when you cross those paranormal boundaries. So, a young local couple, Mohini and Mohit, are walking by the river late at night, wishing for a romantic boat ride. Unbelievably, the ghost appears and they willingly get on board. Huge mistake, right? But then the real fatal error happens. Mohini playfully splashes water, completely disrespecting the eerie silence of the boatwoman. This triggers an immediate terrifying reaction. The ghost starts rowing furiously, the wind rips her veil back, and her terrifying, rotting face is fully revealed. Mohini instantly faints from the shock, eventually waking up completely alone on the riverbank. Over the next few days, she's tormented by these horrifying illusions, like waking up to find her bed floating on the river. Driven mad by the haunting, she goes back to the water, confronts the ghost, and is taken to a deserted island where she finds Mohit dead. It proves this ghost isn't just a passive apparition, she's a highly aggressive, lethal force when provoked. Moving on to section 2, the injustice of the past. To understand the why behind all this intense horror, a writer named Ramesh and the village headmen help us look to the past to discover the story of a human woman named Manjari. So the really crucial point here is that before she was a terrifying monster, Manjari was just a desperate human widow. When her husband Kishan died from an illness, she was left with absolutely nothing. To survive, she took his boat to the river to work as a maji, a boat driver. But she entered a fiercely male-dominated profession, and the men ruthlessly boycotted her. If she offered a ride for 4 coins, a male boatman named Balbir would step in, demand 6 coins, and actively steal her passengers just to ruin her livelihood. And this cruelty all culminated on one fatal night. Despite all that harassment, Manjari stood her ground. She told them, "I too have the right to row my boat in this river, and I too can be a maji." This quote perfectly highlights her brave defiance against men like Balbir. They insisted that a woman working was an insult to men and actively tried to shame her, but Manjari fired back. She refused to beg for survival, boldly claiming her right to work and exist in that space. The contrast between her and the other boatmen is stark and honestly heartbreaking. One night, a man arrives at the river with his brother, who has a severe head injury and is bleeding heavily. They need to cross the river to get to a doctor immediately. The male boatmen? They flat out refuse to help because the men don't have the money up front to pay the fare. Manjari, witnessing this, immediately offers her boat for free to save the man's life. It's a crystal clear display of the male boatman prioritizing greed over human life, while Manjari acted out of sheer compassion. But unfortunately, her compassion was met with ultimate cruelty. The male boatmen, led by Balbir, were absolutely furious. They believed that if she gave a free ride, it would ruin their business model. So they violently intervened to stop her. The men's intervention that fatal night led directly to Manjari's murder, transforming her into the vengeful spirit that subsequently terrorized the waters and forced all the male boatmen to abandon the river entirely.
Which brings us to Section 3, a desperate gamble. We're jumping back to the present timeline now where the writer Ramesh faces a terrifying dilemma that will test the very rules of this ghost story we just uncovered.
Here's the setup. Ramesh's pregnant wife, Nirajini, suddenly goes into painful early labor late at night. The local elder, Birju Kaka, confirms there are literally no carriages or land transport available to get them to the midwife in Mahempur village until morning. And waiting just isn't an option. So out of pure desperation, Ramesh carries his wife to the river and boards the cursed ghost boat. Ramesh knows the lore. He knows he's stepping onto a literal death trap, but it's his absolute only option to save his wife and unborn child. Talk about a rock in a hard place, right?
As they're crossing, the tension snaps. Nirajini, who is entirely unaware that their driver is a lethal ghost, is overcome by labor pains. She angrily yells at Manjari, demanding she row faster. Just like with Mohini splashing the water earlier, this disrespect enrages the spirit. Manjari begins to row furiously, and just as they hit the shore, her veil drops, revealing her terrifying face to the couple. I mean, can you imagine the sheer terror of that moment? And that leads us right into Section 4, Karma and Peace. Now, the village assumes Ramesh and his wife are dead, victims of the ghost's strict rules. But miraculously, they survive. They return to the village 3 days later with their healthy baby, leaving everyone utterly stunned. So, how did they survive? Ramesh, being a writer, pieces it all together. He theorizes based on the classic concept of unfinished business. In folklore, a spirit remains tied to the physical world until its final, desperate wish is fulfilled. Because Manjari was stopped from taking a dying person to a doctor in her final human moments, her unfinished business was tied to a medical emergency. By ferrying Nirajini safely to the midwife, Manjari finally completed that desperate act of helping someone in need. It's like the puzzle pieces finally fit together. And it is a perfect example of poetic justice on the river. In the past, she was violently prevented from saving a life. But in the present, she successfully aids a mother, helping bring new life into the world. It gives the villagers, and honestly us as the audience, a profound sense of closure and relief. The ghost's terrible rules were finally broken by an act of necessity and karma. The village rejoices, believing the curse is officially broken. Hearing this, the cruel boatman Balbir, the very man who ruined Manjari's life, makes a huge, fatal mistake. Believing the ghost has finally crossed over to the afterlife, he joyfully takes his boat out onto the river at night for the first time in years, thinking he finally owns the waters again. But the story holds one final, terrifying twist regarding Manjari's true unfinished business. Out on the dark water, Balbir's smug smile vanishes. Manjari's ghost suddenly appears right in front of him. She reveals the chilling truth. Actually, while saving a life was an important part of her journey, her ultimate unfulfilled desire wasn't just a good deed. It was bloody, righteous vengeance against her murderer. The story finally culminates in this brutal act of karma. Manjari attacks, dragging Balbir and his boat down into the dark, crushing depths of the river forever. The physical embodiment of the injustice she faced, the man who represented the greed and violence of her past, is completely destroyed. Justice served. So, as we wrap up this explainer and you reflect on the legend of the ghost Maji, I want you to ask yourself a question. Was it the righteous act of saving a new life, or the dark satisfaction of destroying her killer that truly set her spirit free? It's a fascinating look at how folklore processes injustice and vengeance. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I will catch you on the next one.